For over a century, football has been more than just a game in Europe. It's been a cultural force, a source of identity, and for far too long, a boys' club. While the men's game soared, guarded by conservative gatekeepers in suits and blazers, women were told to sit it out. The football would endanger their fertility, that it was unfeminine, that their bodies weren't built for the pitch. The warnings were paternalistic, the restrictions severe, bans, silence, and ridicule. But through it all, women never stopped playing. From factory yards to quiet parks, to crowded stadiums and continental tournaments, women found ways to lace up their boots. They built their own clubs, organised their own leagues, and crossed borders where no one else would let them play. The Women's European Championship, now one of the premier events in global sport, rose from that grassroots rebellion. And today, with the Lionesses as champions and the stands packed with fans, it's tempting to think the battle has been won. But this tournament carries more than trophies. It carries the weight of generations who were told no and kept going anyway. This is the story of the Women's Euros, a journey through defiance, dignity, and the pure, unstoppable joy of playing the game. This is the Sporting Almanac Podcast. Good evening, Ben.
Evening, mate. How are you?
I'm okay. I was a little bit melancholy after what happened last week with Diogo Jota, one of my favourite footballers. But I've had quite an emotional few days football-wise, really, because I've coached and refereed at a tournament over the weekend, including refereeing yesterday a tournament for very, very talented young female footballers, which is appropriate given the subject matter today. So that's uplifted me a little bit.
Oh, nice.
After the sad news last week.
Yeah, that was very sad news. Regardless of your footballing affiliations, that's objectively sad, isn't it?
Yeah, horrible.
But yeah, I'm glad that your spirits were lifted. I also had a football themed week. I was at a Faroese Premier League match.
Yes.
Whilst I was in the Faroe Islands, which was a novel experience.
Yeah, we should share some of those pictures on social media. Actually, I might do that as we put this out.
Yeah.
Because they were excellent photographs. As were all your pictures of the Faroe Islands. Looks like a lovely place to visit.
It is a lovely place to visit, mate. If you ever get a chance to go, you should venture north. Yeah.
I shall.
Unspoilt. And to anybody else who's listening who has never been to the Faroe Islands, can I recommend it? But we are digressing. You have already mentioned.
Immediate digression, yeah.
We are footballing theme, though. Heavy emphasis on the football. Back in the wheelhouse. The Women's European Championships.
Yep.
We are late.
Yep, Euro 2025. Indeed, yeah, I was going to say, this is the first time we've ever done an event while it's already started.
Yeah, we're late.
But we didn't want to not do it, and we couldn't not do the Tour de France, so I think this is
it's a happy compromise.
Better late than never.
It's a 4-week tournament, so...
It is, yes.
Yeah. We're not too late to the party, but late nonetheless. It has already started. It started last Wednesday.
England haven't quite been knocked out yet, so still time.
Yeah, not got off to our best start. Serena Wiegmann's first ever loss at European Championships.
Incredible, yeah.
Which, considering she's partaken in 2 as a coach, is pretty remarkable, having previously had a 100% record.
Yeah, 2 tournaments, 2 wins, 1 for the Netherlands, 1 for England. Incredible. And in order to get through, she's going to have to beat her home nation.
Yeah.
Or at least get a draw against them and hope other results go her way.
Yeah.
So,
Should we set the scene for this tournament, and then we can delve into how we got here?
Yeah.
Is that a good place to start, since we're already talking about the results and things?
It is, yeah. I will actually say, just before we start, this will be a slightly shorter episode today because of my busy weekend coaching and refereeing football, which I think is a good excuse. We are a little bit pressed for time now to get to our release date, so we'll keep it a bit shorter than usual today, which probably isn't actually bad advice generally.
Well, it's something that we've been trying to do for a while, so let's see if we can pull it off.
Something we're not very good at. Or I'm not very good at, certainly.
No, we. This is a team effort, mate. We've discussed this many times. But yes, it's being held in Switzerland, this year's tournament. The Swiss, captained by Leah Volti, I might be mispronouncing her surname, but she is an Arsenal midfielder, which is why I know that she is their captain. Yeah, the tournament's already underway. 4 groups of 4, 16 teams in the tournament.
Yeah, it's nostalgic. It's the old European Championship, the old men's European Championship format, and it's one I miss because I hate third place teams going through group stages, as we have discussed many times in the past. So 4 groups of 4, perfection.
Yeah, it's how the Euros should be, really. The women's game took a little while to get here, which we'll dig into.
Yeah.
Cool thing about it though is the Swiss only made their debut in the 2017 tournament, the one that was hosted and won by the Dutch, as you have already mentioned in respect of Sabine Wiegman's accolades. That's in and of itself is pretty illustrative of the growth of the game. Already a host in their third tournament, I think it is now. So yeah, Group A. I mean, the tournament's underway, right? So we're in the second round of group games at the moment. Group A is the most advanced. That's made up of Norway, Finland, and Iceland. Iceland are already out, having suffered 2 defeats. It is a shame, actually, because they also came into this group the highest ranked team in their group. They were ranked 14th, but they were also in absolutely stinking form, despite that ranking. I think they hadn't won in 11 or 10 or 11 coming into the tournament, and obviously they've carried that through. So it's likely to be the Norwegians going through, Finland or the Swiss. But I think the Swiss beat the Finnish last night.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe the home nation are in the box seat. Yeah, Group B, Spain, Italy, Belgium, Portugal. Spain and Italy, big favourites to advance out of that group. I think, in fact, if both Spain and Italy win in this round of fixtures and Belgium and Portugal are both out, Spain are currently winning against Belgium, I want to say, at the time of recording.
You can work out exactly when we're recording this because it's currently half time in that game and it is 2-1 to Spain at the moment. So.
And Spain are massive favourites for this tournament, particularly after the first round of games, because you would have probably said England were up there, but they lost their first game to the French. So Spain, current world champions, big favourites for this one. Group C, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, all in this group together, along with Poland. And that's a pretty competitive group, actually. The Germans have got an incredible record in the Women's Euros. And the Swedes, as you will probably come on to, and the Danish for that matter, actually.
And the Danish, very much the Danish, actually, in the early days.
Yeah.
The unofficial tournaments.
They both have pretty proud histories in women's football. The Polish are fairly new to the party, but, they're in the tournament, so anything could happen, I guess.
They're here.
But likely to be Germany, and then either Sweden or Denmark, I think. Poland, the outsiders. And then Group D. As we've already mentioned, the group of death, we've already mentioned 3 of the participants. England, the Netherlands and France. That is a pretty barbaric 3 to be drawn
it's
in a
nasty
group.
draw, isn't it?
England and the Netherlands are the previous 2 winners of this tournament, and the French are sort of like nearly men or women for the nearly women for the purposes of women's football. They always the bridesmaid, never the bride at the moment, but they are very good.
Maybe overdue a win.
Yes, I think that's probably fair. And then the Welsh making up the in that group.
Just great to be there. It's fantastic they qualified.
Yeah, did very well to qualify. And the Northern Irish nearly qualified. They got knocked out in the playoffs. The Republic as well, I think. The Republic have never qualified for the Women's Euros. They're still trying. 2 from 5 in the sort of home nations in the Republic is not too bad. Not too bad.
No, not bad at all. And yeah, great to see the Welsh there.
But yeah, I've been really looking forward to this tournament just because the growth of the game has been crazy recently.
There's very few other sports in our lifetime, obviously the section of the sport with the women's game, that has grown to the extent that the women's game have, that we've been able to sort of see firsthand close up. And obviously I'm fortunate enough to have seen very much close up because, as I've mentioned in the previous episode, I coach at a junior football club that I coach on the mixed side, but the girls' side of the club has gone from having around 40 or 50 players when I joined, which was 9 years ago, to now having 200 players. And most of them obviously coming in on the back of the Lionesses' success. But even before that, it was growing. It's such a vastly different sport to what it was previously, or the women's game is. And it's so good to see. It's so supported now and so visible.
Yeah, no, it is. Sorry, mate. I was just going to jump in to say, and it's got like some genuine stars now.
Yeah.
You know, like household names if you're interested in women's football and you follow it even sort of slightly, then you'll be familiar with some of the names, and some of them are on show. Shall I throw a few out there for you?
Absolutely.
Just to inform those that are maybe not familiar with women's football. So the Spanish, as already said, who are really, really good. They've got two former Ballon d'Or winners in their side. Alexia Putellas, I think. I might be mispronouncing her surname. That's going to be a reoccurring theme.
It already is on the almanac.
Yeah, and Etana Bonmati, she's the current Ballon d'Or holder, and Claudia Pina as well, who they're like three superstars in Spanish women's football. I think Putellas and Bonmati have won the last 4 Ballon d'Ors between them. 2 for Putellas in 21-22, and then Bonmati 23-24. And then, you've got Bayern Munich duo Leah Schuler and Clara Buell for the Germans. Ada Hegerberg for Norway. She's a former Ballon d'Or winner. Caroline Graham Hansen, who was a runner-up in the Ballon d'Or this year, or last year. Yeah, and then also Sandy Baltimore, who scored against us.
Yeah.
God, Sandy. For France. I think she also plays for Chelsea, Sandy Baltimore.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, this season.
Yeah, so, and then, then you've got some more familiar names. The Dutch have got Vivian Miedema, who, if you're an Arsenal or Man City fan, you'll be very familiar. She is the all-time WSL top scorer. Banged them in for Arsenal, then suffered a serious knee injury and ACL, which is a phenomenon that is riddling women's football, unfortunately, for some reason.
Yeah. I weirdly have quite a lot on that. Because, I'll come to it, but one of the main complaints, or one of the main reasons for men intervening and stopping women's football happening was that they get injured more than men. But the truth is they don't. But what they do get, there's 2 things that they get more than men. One is ACL injuries. They're very, very common in women. The other one is concussions. But general theory on that is it's not that women get more concussions. It's just they talk about it more. They admit to it more.
Yeah.
There's not the horrible culture of manning up, as it were.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah, we have to pretend you're not injured, pretend you're not dizzy and about to throw up, which us as coaches actively try and avoid at all costs and dissuade our boys particularly from doing that, because it is very common.
Yeah, it is very common.
And they're very dangerous head injuries.
They are, and they have long-lasting impacts, as we've spoken about previously, in respect to CTE and things like that. Yeah, no, mate, that's really interesting. I didn't know that, but I did know that ACLs were a thing that afflicted women's football for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dutch have also got Danielle van der Donk, who used to play for Arsenal, which is how I became familiar with her, but then she was at Lyon for a long time, and Lyon are a very, very good women's side, who Arsenal dumped out of the Champions League this year. How
many times are we going to mention that this episode?
Unbelievable away performance, mate. But yeah, she's actually come back to the WSL with the London Lionesses. So she's coming back to England to play her domestic football. And then obviously England, you've got like Lucy Bronze, Leah Williamson, Alicia Russo, Chloe Kelly's there, the scorer of the winner.
What a moment that was.
So yeah, like lots of, like, this is the point, sorry. I'm just listing people there and giving some background. But like, there was a point there, wasn't there? Which is, there are some genuine superstars in the women's game. And there are some superstars that aren't there. That such is the depth of talent now that is on show. So it wouldn't be a scandal. It wouldn't be a major tournament without some scandal. Jenny Hermoso, Spain's record scorer, she got dropped. So did Ramona Bachmann. Well, no, she didn't get dropped, sorry. Ramona Bachmann is out with an ACL injury, to continue that theme.
There we go.
She's a former Chelsea forward, and she's up front for Switzerland, which is a real shame that she's missing her home tournament. The one that also did get dropped, though, that was my point, was France captain Wendy Reynard, very controversially dropped. And so was their all-time leading goal scorer, Eugenie Le Sommer. So, like, this is what I mean. Like, the game's grown. There's lots of people that are decent at this and, like, very, very good. And not everyone makes squads anymore. It's very competitive.
I strongly suspect it's going to get... I mentioned this in our previous episode, and actually I will point out now, if you want a bit of background on English women's football particularly, go back to episode 7, which was our FA Cup episode. 28th minute of that episode, for about 20 minutes, we talk about the women's game in England, particularly sort of the First World War, and it getting banned and then coming back, which is a good story, of course. So I mentioned in that episode, obviously, this massive uptake of new young girls playing the game, and the amount that my club has grown. I suspect this is something replicated across the country, and I think we're going to get to the point where it is going to be in about 8 to 10 years' time, I would say, where we're going to get an influx. There's going to be such a huge pool of female players available. They'll be expanding the Women's Super League structure, the Women's League structure, I should say, maybe expanding the league itself. There's going to be so many more female players available on the back of the Lioness' success. And that'll be the same in all these countries. It'll be the same due to the popularity of the women's game and these young girls now having idols, people to look up to. It's coming. It's going to be very interesting when it does.
Yeah, well, I think they are expanding the WSL, aren't they? Or they're restructuring it for that exact reason.
I think they're going to have to expand it big time, yeah.
So yeah, I completely see where you're coming from, mate. And I think that's borne out actually by the fact that, well, the victories of the Netherlands and England. I mean, the Eredivisie, women's Eredivisie in the Netherlands was only set up in 2007. And then, was it 10 years later, they win the Euros?
10 years later, yeah.
And then England...
Almost exactly the same for England. The WSL was 2011.
Yep. And then 11 years later, we win the Euros.
Would have been 10 years had the Euros not been delayed, yeah.
Yeah. Like, so it's an undeniable and irresistible correlation between professionalism, access to resource, opportunity, and then obviously the emergence of talent.
Yeah, the snowballing effect of popularity as well. And that is not new. The thing about this is that isn't new. What is new in modern women's football is there's no resistance to it. In fact, it's being supported actively, and therefore it's just growing and growing and growing, as it always has threatened to do. I'll take you back in time a little bit and talk about a few different countries, just in brief, a little bit of potted history on them. But there's been so many occasions that I didn't realise until I was doing my research to this episode. Obviously, we know about England. There was popularity in England once the opportunity came during the First World War. 53,000 people watching the Dick Kerr ladies at Preston. It was a hugely popular sport, but when the opportunities was there and when the momentum from the newspapers was there, but then it got stamped down on by the FA. And the same thing plays out in so many different countries. The sport becomes popular, these role models emerge, more and more people want to come and play the game, and then the authorities stamp down on it. They ban it, they make it difficult for players to play the game, they ridicule it in the newspapers, and eventually it goes to the sidelines and gets marginalised. That is not going to happen this time, and it is a very good thing, and I can't wait to see how it plays out, because it's going to be exponential. We're not there yet. There's so much more growth to be achieved.
Oh, for sure. But like the foundations are certainly in place, because I was actually thinking this in respect of like even like the host nations of this tournament. So obviously you got the Swiss, a first time host now, but out of the last 5 hosts have been 3 debuts. So Finland, Netherlands and Switzerland have all hosted the tournament for the first time.
Nice.
England and Sweden have hosted their second tournaments, but obviously you've also had tournament hosted by Germany, Denmark, Norway and Italy, and the Germans and the Norwegians have also hosted it twice. So like pretty diverse range of hosts, but the 2029 tournament is going through its preliminary bids now, and Denmark and Sweden have gone in as a joint. Poland, Portugal have also expressed interest, and they would be first-time hosts if they were to get it. And then the Germans and Italians are also interested in hosting, but the winner won't be revealed until August. Sorry, not the winner. The official bids won't be revealed until August.
If I was UEFA, I would prioritise Poland of those options, because one thing, if you look at the map of the teams that have qualified for this tournament, it is very Central and Western Europe. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Poland's in Central Europe, but it would be a bit closer to home for potentially fans from sort of neighbouring countries, Hungary, big footballing nations in that area to potentially come over. Hopefully Ukraine be a bit more stable by then. That would be nice. And their fans being able to come over, because there is less representation the further east you go in Europe. I think that's obviously probably cultural, but it might just be that the wave hasn't quite hit there yet. So it would be, I think, beneficial to maybe move east a little bit, give those young fans the opportunity to potentially travel. So,
yeah, definitely.
Just my opinion.
Well, Poland have also they've recently hosted the men's version. And so they've got the infrastructure. And
they've got fantastic infrastructure in Poland.
Yeah.
The difference between Poland now and when I first went there 20 odd years ago is vast. Its economy is growing massively. It's one of the biggest economies, or getting towards being one of the biggest economies in Europe now. Can certainly handle it. Yeah. And that would be my choice, but we'll see who gets it.
Yeah.
It'll be great wherever it is.
Well, I agree, because I think you can make the same case for Portugal.
Yeah,
first time host, massive footballing nation, obviously. qualify for this tournament. So yeah, I agree with you. I would just like it to be another first-time host, I think.
Yes, I think so.
You split the difference between Poland and Portugal for me. But there'll be nothing wrong with it going back to a well-supported nation either, so we'll just see. It's cool. Like it's long may it continue.
It will. There's no, you don't need to wish for it. It's going to continue.
Well, exactly. Is this a good time to then sort of talk about where it all came from and how we got here? Since we've been waxing lyrical about its exponential growth, it might be worth explaining what that growth was.
Yeah, I think there's two main countries within Europe that have played a bigger part than most in getting to this point. I'm also going to mention a couple of other countries just to talk about the difference between them and other countries in Europe in terms of how the game was backed in the early days, specifically Scandinavian countries who have a much more liberal attitude towards everything and obviously a lot more grasp of female equality generally. I'll start off talking about these two countries. So Italy and Germany are the two countries who had the biggest contributing factors to early women's football and sort of the precursor tournaments that were happening then. So I'll start with Italy, if that's all right.
Yeah, left field as well, Italy. I wouldn't have had money on it at the time.
Yeah, well, Italy, obviously, we've spoken about Italy before, and they have a very, very passionate approach to sport. There's also a long history of conservatism in that country, obviously Catholic conservatism, and you end up with figures like Silvio Berlusconi, who is, let's say, not got the best reputation when it comes to women, or didn't have. So this story started in 1933, just briefly, which was a group called the Gruppo Femminile Calcistico, was formed in Milan by Giovanna Bocciolini as Italy's first organised women's football club. They were all very, very young. And this is a theme, actually, that repeats itself. It's always a lot of very young women. The age of 14 is not uncommon for these early international players to be.
That's mad. That's girls. That's not women. But yeah, all power to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Girls tend to mature quicker than boys in every sense of the word. But obviously, physically speaking, a 14-year-old is closer to being, or more likely to be closer to being a full-size woman than a 14-year-old boy is. And I know that having coached 14-year-olds this season, the size difference between them is vast, but the girls do tend to grow quicker. But yeah, so Italy at this time obviously was a fascist country under Mussolini. The group had to apply for permission to play to the sports ministry. They initially received permission as long as the matches were played behind closed doors. And another obligation placed upon them was to push for medical clearance from the fascist director of a Genoa Medical Institute, Nicola Pende, who approved, but he did say, and this is, I'm quoting this, but translated from the original Italian, so there may be a couple of anomalies, but nevertheless, I believe from a medical point of view, no harm can come to the aesthetics of women's bodies, to the state of abdominal organs and sexual organs in particular, from a non-competitive focused game of football, which ordinarily requires efforts of exaggeration of muscular movements that are always harmful to the female organism. So play, but for pleasure only, and in moderation. Like, what the fuck? Men are so weird sometimes.
It is weird. Like, on this point, you know, the whole sort of protectionism, conservative mindset that you were sort of referencing, and like that kind of attitude of like, you know, you're okay, but just only as long as it's for fun. Like, if you were to make a case for the defense, when it comes to certain sports, like say combat sports, like boxing or MMA, obviously women can do them, but I can understand the thinking historically, right? Like with the lack of sophistication in the way people think about these things and the way in which like human beings have just generally developed their understanding of like what each gender is capable of, etc.
Yeah.
But like, so I can almost understand it. And then maybe you could extend that at a push to like rugby, that sort of thing.
American football or,
American football, yeah, exactly. But like, oh man, like it's absolutely insane the way in which people used to think, you know, like running and football and tennis, and less so tennis because we discussed that in the Wimbledon episode, but like just so many sports where they're just like, oh, you know, we have to be careful, the girls can't do it, and it's like, but they can.
Obviously, this is a very modern mindset. It shouldn't be, but it is. But the idea that you could just let women know the risk, if there were risks, genuinely, let women know the risks and let them make a decision what they can do with their own bodies, maybe? Or is that too modern a mindset?
Yeah, that's crazy, mate. What are you thinking?
Sorry. I'm so woke, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so So weird men.
That's the starting point. We've got this Italian dude setting the framework.
It's yeah. I mean, as a result, the women, they played 2 halves of 50 minutes. It later became 20 minutes when they were
so generous
treated to an extra 5 minutes. Yeah, they had to play with a kid-sized ball. Kicking in the air was forbidden, and the women had to play in petticoats, of course.
Oh yeah, well, that's better than corsets, I guess. Is it?
Yeah, I guess. I've just put petticoats. Maybe corsets were there as well. Who knows?
It's all relative.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a familiar story?
Go on.
Despite these restrictions, it was positively reported on, began to spread, and became hugely popular, and lots of different clubs were set up in several different cities. Like many cases to follow, this immediately led to male authorities to intervene. In this case, about 9 months after it was formed, the Italian National Olympic Committee banned all competitions, effectively killing the women's game for the remainder of the fascist dictatorship's ill-fated time in power.
So weird, because it's
history repeating.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is basically just an exact version of what happened in England. But like, I just don't understand the contradiction of like, play for fun, you can do it, but as soon as you enjoy it and you achieve the whole purpose of playing for fun, we'll crush it. It's like I don't like.
It's control. It's entirely about control.
Yeah. You've got it. You nailed it.
And I don't know. I don't know what pressure. They may have been under pressure from various other authorities. There are big conservative authorities, shall we say, in Italy particularly.
Are you talking about the Vatican?
Your words, not mine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, regardless, it's just history repeating. Women want to play. Men in power treat them with kid gloves. It gets popular. More people want to play. Men in power restrict it. Where have we heard that before? Where have we seen that since?
Everywhere.
Anyway, in Italy, football carried on after the war. A few tentative steps back. In Trieste, which is a port city near the Slovenian border, a couple of teams founded. And then 4 years later in Naples, the Italian Women's Football Association was formed. That only lasted until 1959. In 1968, the Italian National Championship was formed, and that still exists to this day. And it even dabbled with a bit of professionalism in the early days. It was by far the most advanced league in women's football at the time. And yeah, pretty impressive for the Italians at that point. And on the back of that, they decided to expand the game, looked across borders to expand the game to the rest of Europe. So at this point, it would shock you to learn that neither the UEFA or FIFA gave a shit about women's football. I'm sure that would shock you.
That is shocking. I really thought that they would have been pioneers of the women's game.
So, and this is another thing that actually repeats itself quite a lot. There's a opportunism on the part of, I'm going to assume, male businessmen to see potential in the women's game, which I can see the good and the bad in. Obviously, it's an opportunity because it's popular, which is a good thing, but also potential of men taking advantage of that situation is a bad thing. But nevertheless, a group of Italian businessmen took the opportunity to form the Federation of Independent European Female Football, which is FIEF, F-I-E-F-F. I'm going to call it FIEF. I think that's probably what it's supposed to be. So that's the Fédération Internationale Européenne de Football Féminin. That's pronounced perfectly. And yeah, filled the gap left by UEFA, essentially. They ran international tournaments, including hosting a European competition in 1969 between Italy, France, England and Denmark, which Italy won, beating Denmark 3-1 in the final. And they followed this up by hosting a World Cup for women in 1970, which was...
Go on, sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
please go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mean the country that took women's football most seriously also won the tournament?
Yes.
That's weird. Where have we seen that before?
And one of the most progressive countries in Europe came second, in Denmark.
So yeah, sorry, I interrupted. 1970 World Cup.
Yeah, 1970 World Cup, which is mostly European countries, but Mexico joined as well. And they were the shock surprise team of the tournament, beating Austria 9-0 in the first round. I'm sure we'll go into more detail on these when the Women's World Cup rolls around, but it actually led to FIEF deciding to host another Women's World Cup in Mexico in 1971, which if anyone's heard of the Lost Lionesses story, I have a lot of notes on that, but I'm not going to bring them up today. I'm going to save them for another day, the World Cup potentially, in a couple of years' time. It is interesting to point out the FIEF were not the first European country to host a pan-European women's competition. That belonged to West Germany. So I'm going to take you back in time again to talk a bit about Germany, because this is also interesting. And also, contains some ludicrous quotes by men. You'll be shocked.
Yes. I'm looking forward to it. Let's go.
Yeah. So women's football in Germany in the 1950s was quite a good mix of chaos, popularity and talent, which inevitably followed a predictable path of being banned just as it was breaking out. But the good thing about this ban was it was completely ignored for the most part, and women just carried on playing regardless, giving a big middle finger to the German Football Association, which is the DFB. And these things came together to create what could be argued was the first Women's European Championship in 1957. So the first women's team in Germany was founded in 1930 by 19-year-old Lotte Specht, which was called the Erste Deutsche Damen Fußball Club, which is literally the first German women's football club, which is very easy to remember.
Yeah.
It only lasted a few months. It was a classic example of enthusiasm clashing with institutionalized sexism, as per usual. Didn't really get off the ground. After the war, women's football saw a big resurgence, with players like Christina Kleinhans of Fortuna Dortmund. She was famed for her technique and work rate on the wing and her fiery temper. Got sent off quite a lot. She played many times unofficially for Germany, winning 150 caps at a time women's football was officially banned by the German FA, but obviously completely ignored. In a tale as old as time, the DFB had nobly stepped in just as women's football was taking off after Germany hosted the 1954 World Cup, and women inspired by their male countrymen's success as they won the tournament, looking to take up the game, were beaten back by the bastions of conservatism. And nobly so. What heroes. Bet they slept well in their beds that night.
It's a great legacy.
Yeah. To justify the ban, the DFB argued that the physicality of football could harm women's fertility and overall health, and that sport was unsuitable for a public spectacle. Are you ready for one of the worst quotes I've ever heard from a public official?
I am on the edge of my seat.
To quote a DFB official, Huber Klassen, "It was a serious sin for girls to run across the field with wobbly breasts and then kick the ball or foul each other." Men are weird.
Men are weird.
I mean, that was obviously translated from German, so maybe I'm not going to give him any benefit of the doubt. That is just
that's not been lost in translation. I think the crux of what he was trying to say came across quite transparently.
One of the worst things about that quote is it's not contemporary. He was one of the officials in the 1950s, but he was speaking in the 1990s about it. So he had another 40 years of bloody social development, the entire sexual revolution of the 1960s to go off, and everything else that's happened since, and still thought that was an appropriate thing to say. So there you go.
Yeah, that is weird.
Men are weird.
That's
not all men, obviously. Don't want to tar all men with the same brush, but there's a fair few of us guys. Do better.
Yeah. Dinosaur. Anyway, carry on. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from it being whatever that idiot said?
So German women's football was split along. So this is after the ban now. It's been banned, but they didn't care and they carried on. But there was a couple of different associations at the time. They couldn't bring themselves together. Obviously, not just that. The entire country was split in two because this is during the Cold War. But there was one day in June 1957 where it was at the point where there was even two separate Germany teams playing on the same day, both against Dutch opposition. One won 7-0 and the other lost 6-0, both in front of several thousand spectators. So, yeah.
That's weird. What about both West German sides?
Yeah, both West German sides. Sorry, yeah, I just mentioned.
Well, it's a bit of a
East
daft
Germany.
question for me because East Germany would not have been at the forefront of the development of women's football, I doubt.
Well, actually, no. Actually, communism tended to be a bit more progressive in terms of women's sport in many cases. Although in East Germany's case, that usually involved
shitloads of drugs.
Well, yeah, serious effects on the female body in many cases.
Yeah, there'll be time to explore that in athletics.
Yes, that will absolutely come up. It's a very interesting story, actually, East German doping. In July of 1957, a match against a representative team from England was played in Stuttgart in front of 11,000 spectators, again, despite the DFB ban. The Stuttgarter Zeitung newspaper commented, "The unstoppable waves of equality have licked the football field and swept away the strict DFB like a rotten dam." which is a great quote, I think.
It's very...
Licked is a strange word to use, but it might be mistranslated.
Yeah, I was going to say. It's very descriptive.
I mean, I'm not a natural German speaker. It's my least worst language, but that's only comparing it to French. And anyone who's heard my French pronunciation won't be shocked by that. So, I'm not sure which of the two Germany teams, the one that won 7-0 or the one that lost 6-0, played England that day, but the result was 1-1. So, let's pretend it's a good one. The English team was made up of Manchester Corinthians players, amazingly, coached by a very significant figure from the men's game we've mentioned before. Do you care to guess what player with links to Germany and Manchester might have coached that team?
Bert Trautmann.
Bert Trautmann.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Our hero.
Bert Trautmann was a big pioneer of women's football.
That's cool.
He went over to Germany, acted as a translator and coach for these women in the summer of 1957. And then, after that, as I mentioned, there was a European football tournament hosted in the autumn of 1957. Unfortunately, Bert Trautmann couldn't go along to that for the very good reason that he was goalkeeping for Manchester City at that point. But nevertheless, good story.
Yeah, it's a great story. Yeah. Go back to the FA Cup episode, anyone who wants to learn a bit more about Bert.
Yeah, it's a great story. Bert Trautmann's I thought he was an interesting figure before I even learned about this, and I genuinely never knew about this.
I didn't either. Yeah, that is cool. Yes. Yeah. Carry on. Sorry.
So, out of the success of Germany's women's football and continuing to give that middle finger to the DFB, the International Ladies Football Association was formed in Nuremberg in August 1957, though it was headquartered in Luxembourg for obvious reasons. The ILFA scheduled a European Women's Football Championship to be held in Berlin in November 1957, with 4 European teams from Germany, the Netherlands, Austria and England, again represented by the Manchester Corinthians, as I mentioned, without Trautmann this time. Players ranged from 14-year-old Doris Klauke from Germany and Busty Hilton from Manchester to a 35-year-old Dutch defender named Bean. I don't have a first name for her.
Oh, random.
Yeah, so big age range.
She's the original Brazilian as well, then, with the single name.
Yeah, exactly. Bean, good name. They managed to secure the Berlin Poststadion for the tournament, pushing the usual occupants to a different stadium, leading to headlines such as "Women's football confuses men," which I genuinely might use as the title of this episode. That's fantastic. With a German male club MD commenting, "It's already got to the point where the women are pushing the men off the field." Presumably with disgust.
I would have thought so.
So the DFB were not amused. Their president even suggested getting all stadiums and pitches closed to stop women's matches being played, which sounds like a fairly nuclear option if I correctly translated it.
Cut your nose to spite your face stuff, that.
Yeah.
Let's just shut it all down. If they have to play, no one can play. Christ.
Oh, God almighty. The Spander Volksblatt newspaper commented on internationally recognised associations and estimated 5,000 active female players in Europe at this time, with clubs being inundated with requests to join. So it was genuinely, 1950 was a genuinely big time for women's football. I mean, obviously it was technically, I say it was banned in England. English teams were banned from using any FA affiliated grounds or, having any affiliated coaches. Basically, you were blacklisted if you coached for a women's team or if you allowed a women's team to use your ground. So it was as good as banned. Yeah, 5,000 in Europe. It's not bad. It's a start.
It's a start.
It's just an estimate as well. Certainly a lot less than today. I mean, I think there's at least 5,000 in York alone, if not more. The first unofficial European Championships kicked off on November the 2nd, 1957. It wasn't as big a success as hoped, both in terms of spectators, but mostly for the German team, who sadly, heartbreakingly, tragically lost the final 4-0 to the Manchester Corinthians team from England.
Devastating.
Yeah. The organisers were criticised as dubious profiteers who lacked the business acumen to exploit the growing popularity of women's football, and the team was criticised for obvious reasons, losing to England 4-0 being the main part of it.
Yeah. Well, that's just an excuse, isn't it? That's the whole Andy Murray mentality.
But it was a start. It was a start, and it was an important piece of the women's game history. There's 150 more Germany internationals played, as I said, over the next decade. When the governing bodies of Germany finally caught up, the German team quickly became the dominant force in Europe. winning 8 European Championships from 1989 to 2013, and sadly, tragically, finishing as runners-up to England in 2022, and also winning the World Cups in 2003 and 2007, and an Olympic gold medal in 2016. So it shows what a sport like a country like Germany, where the sport is insanely popular, could have been if the people in charge weren't so resistant to what it could be. And it happens, there's so many countries where it's just like, if you'd have just invested or even not actively resisted it, you can point to England here, point to Italy big time for this.
Italy in particular.
You could have mopped up.
Yeah.
Absolutely mopped up in these tournaments.
For sure. Like, I think that's a really interesting observation, actually, because there's definitely been some false dawns. And Italy is the obvious one, given it was at the forefront of women's football and it just completely missed the boat. And to this day, they still haven't won a major female tournament.
Which is incredible when you think about they had the first, even if just sort of dipping its toe into professionalism in the 1960s, they had a partly professional league, a semi-professional league, which was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got the polar opposite end of that spectrum. Like, whilst you're obviously making the observation that the Germans could have done more, like, they are, I guess, an example of, what happens when the penny finally does drop, because there is no one more successful in women's European football than Germany, who have won eight titles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tournament used to be every 2 years rather than every 4 years. So if you're wondering how they packed in that many titles from a tournament that was first played in 1984, there you are. I'll obviously come to that in a second, the first tournament. But yeah, I mean, Germany, the way they do sport, it's very different to the Italians, to be fair. It's a lot less passionate, a lot more left brain and a lot less right brain, you'd say, if you believe in that sort of thing. Yeah, the second the leash was let off in Germany, this was always going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's no surprise. And it just goes to show, because the other country in Europe you could potentially say that about, would probably be England.
Yeah, yours truly, for sure.
But the difference was, the leash, as we talk about obviously in that previous FA Cup episode, the leash wasn't let off. The WFA, the Women's Football Association, not the Women's Football Association, as I mentioned, a precursor organisation, was set up in the late 1960s. It originally appointed a female as chair, who was under pressure, was immediately ousted and replaced by a male counterpart. Everything was stunted. They did their best, and there was a lot of great people doing great things, but they were very resistant to fast change. It was 22 years from the women's game being unbanned in 1971 until the FA took it under their wing in 1993. And then there was huge criticism for the FA for dragging their feet over it. Started changing around 2001. The FA Cup final started being televised, which it's a small step, but it's something. All of a sudden, at least there's some women's football on TV for potential future footballers to watch. And in, I think, about 2006, there was an important white paper put out within the government talking about changes to the game, including allowing girls to continue in the mixed pathway longer, which is the case now. Girls can continue in the mixed pathway until it's definitely under 16s, but I've got a feeling it might be under 18s now. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I may have said this before, I see no reason why, other than the fact that you would need everyone to be cool about it, that a talented female footballer couldn't play. Well, we couldn't have all men's football become mixed football. Essentially, there's no reason we couldn't do it. There'd be a few logistical things you'd have to take into account, but
I mean, I guess the main reason why you wouldn't want to do it necessarily would be because if you want your female teams to be cohesive,
yeah, true,
then you want them playing together from at least 16 or something, in the same way that you might want your boys doing something similar. But that's a pragmatic reason, not a physiological one.
I suppose the other argument would be you don't really need to, because, as we say, the women's game is growing. You don't want to put any barriers in the way of that not being the case.
Yeah.
You don't want to make it into this a second-class sport, essentially. But I just generally speaking, I see no reason why a talented female footballer can't progress to a high level, because it's a technical sport. It's a game you play primarily with your brain.
What it would be nicer to see is more clubs operating on like a holistic basis. Rather than having like a sort of a female limb or a women's limb. is like, a bit like you would find at an athletics club,
Yes.
like mixed training occasionally, general atmosphere of inclusivity, that kind of thing, or rather than it kind of being as an add-on.
Yeah. Coaches who coach on
both
genders.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah. But yeah,
because I mean, one of the main reasons the women's game is progressing how it is, and this is starting to come through, obviously with a bit of a delay on it, because players tend to become coaches, but obviously the women's side is getting access to better coaching as well, because there's more opportunities there, obviously, to become a professional coach in the women's game than there was 20 years ago. There's very few opportunities 20 years ago, and now there's plenty of opportunities, so better coaches are going to seek that side of the game, regardless of whether they're male or female. I think that as well, there'll be a lag on it, but this whole idea that the women's game is going to be inundated with talented young players soon, add a few years to that, and it's going to be coaches as well. There's going to be a lot of coaches coming. It's not that you necessarily have to have played the game before to be able to coach at the professional level, but it's going to add to that pool, isn't it? It's going to add to the talent available. So
yeah.
You'll see, all going to snowball.
You'll see women that had good careers transitioning into coaching, and you'll see more opportunities for young female coaches who are going direct into coaching, and or other roles at clubs that, might be traditionally dominated by men. Yeah,
it's true.
But yeah, like it's a good news story in the modern day, I think. I
think it's a great story, yeah.
But yeah, sorry, you were about to tell us how the official Euros came about.
Yeah, it's just a quick history on this, really. It's going to be basically more slagging off of the international bodies.
Predominantly UEFA, right? Because UEFA...
Oh, I'm not leaving FIFA out as well.
Not leaving FIFA out, but like considering it is the UEFA European Championship, and I think that their involvement in this, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, was triggered by a concern that someone might actually steal their thunder, effectively, rather than...
I mean...
Yeah.
So, UEFA in the early 1970s, obviously the WFA had founded in England. You had this FIF founding in Italy, which is an independent organisation. Their main fear was the loss of control. So they ordered, essentially, one of the main reasons, there's two main reasons that England finally brought women's football out of the dark in 1971. One of them was the founding of the WFA, which meant that they themselves were concerned about losing control and having a competing, whatever it might be, another organisation running football that wasn't them. And there was pressure from UEFA. The pressure from UEFA to all the governing bodies of Europe to take the women's side under their control was there, as some countries took it in a better light than others, and some of the countries that did so were the Scandinavian countries, and you'll see the success of that soon. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily because they were trying to expand the women's game for the love of the game, because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
They were doing it because they were worried about losing control. They already had FIF, who were making money and running these championships, which were very popular, including world championships. And that's what they were scared of. It wasn't anything.
Didn't the meeting
heartfelt.
Minutes reflect that as well? Isn't there there's some publicly made, there are some meeting minutes that have been made publicly available, which basically illustrate what you're saying.
Yeah, so in 1979, so obviously we had these tournaments by FIF in the 60s and 70s. In 1979, Italy again hosted a Women's European Championship, but this time on a much bigger scale. A scale probably fairly familiar to, not too different to what is currently ongoing. It was 12 teams in 4 groups of 3. So not too far off, with the group winners progressing into the semi-finals. England, Italy, Denmark and Sweden made the semis, with Italy defeating the Lionesses, sadly, and Denmark knocking out their neighbours to make another final together. These finals, at this point, are basically all Italy-Denmark. The Danes this time came out on top. FIFA at this time had repeatedly refused to sanction women's matches, declaring this was only possible through national associations and confederations, obviously missing the point that there were many associations who had been doing this for years, albeit in many cases unofficial associations. But they were only doing it because there was no desire there or no charge there for the actual associations to do it. UEFA also gave zero damns. They were hostile to FIF from the beginning, particularly, and having set up an all-male committee on women's football in 1971, had, by 1979, organised precisely 0 women's competitions. So what the hell was the point? What's that committee for?
Keeping up appearances, mate.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
That's a tale as old as time, isn't it? Got to be seen to be doing the right thing, but not actually doing the right thing. That's a modern phenomenon that persists to this day. As long as they look good, everything's fine, isn't it?
It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Nevertheless, the 1979 tournament wasn't a big financial success, but for the individual FAs and organisations that went to it, they had quite a bit of success and they made a bit of money out of it. The organisers maybe didn't make quite as much money as they wanted, but that was really neither here nor there. In 1979, as you say, some minutes from UEFA cited the tournament as a cause for concern, this tournament in Italy as a cause for concern. The concern presumably being the loss of power and control over the game, as opposed to,
of course,
any mistreatment of the women or any idea that they could do it better or anything like that. Yeah. But nevertheless, in 1980, they finally decided to sanction a first official UEFA Women's Championship, albeit one that the final wouldn't be played in until 1984.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's where we get to.
It was a qualifying tournament over the next few years. 4 teams qualified for the final tournament, which, to be fair, was the same as the men's Euros back in the day. Only 4 teams qualified. It only became 8 teams in the men's Euros, I think, in 1988, maybe 1984, sometime around then. But it was 4 teams in the men's Euros for many years after an extensive qualifying tournament, obviously.
Yeah.
So 4 teams qualified. Can we guess what 4 teams qualified?
Can I go with Germany, Italy, Denmark, and England?
Well, you've actually got one team wrong, and it was the eventual winners. So it wasn't Germany. Germany didn't qualify. It was Sweden. It was exactly the same 4 teams.
Sweden.
They got to the semi-finals of the 79 unofficial Euros. So it was Italy, Sweden, Denmark, and England. But this time round, it was England and Sweden who met in a 2-legged final, with England establishing a long tradition by losing on penalties after a 1-0 win at home for each team. The second leg being played at Kenilworth Road in Luton, ending in a 1-1 draw in aggregate, and then England lost on penalties. There's a lot to be said for that tournament in terms of the engagement of the media and the respective FAs, or the WFA in England's case, in the actual tournament. Obviously, the FA itself in England didn't take part, didn't engage at all, because it was with the WFA at the time. But the media barely reported on the final, even though it was an England team in the final. It wasn't on TV, it wasn't on the radio. There is some actually quite interesting footage, which has clearly been digitized from a VCR tape of the final on YouTube, and I would recommend you go and watch it. It's just like a handheld camcorder at the side of the pitch, but actually looking at it, the standard is pretty good. It's not obviously the same as the women's game nowadays with the vast amount of players playing the game, which is only going to get more and more, but it was a good standard of football on a horrible pitch in poor conditions in 1980s Luton. The Sweden first leg was played at the capital in front of, I think, about 6,000 or 7,000 people. The return leg was played in Luton in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people in England. So it's let's just say I'm not disappointed at that point that Sweden won. I think they were more engaged. They probably deserved it, but it is good to say that England's engagement, the media's engagement, and England's sort of embrace of the women's game has definitely improved since then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sweden were... let's just have a quick look here at their record. They've actually arguably underachieved. I mean, they were...
Yeah, I think so. They were compared to their Scandinavian neighbours, yeah.
I mean, that's their only Euros win. So I should have guessed that, because I knew that they had only won 1. So to have not even guessed that they qualified was a bit dumb. But they've made another 3 finals and come 3rd, or at least made the semis on another, 6 or 7 occasions. And they've made a World Cup final and came 3rd in the World Cup. And they've made the semis of the World Cup. They come 3rd 4 times or something. So to have only 1 major tournament under their belt, geez. Sweden.
Yeah.
Get your act together.
Yeah, especially when the early dominance of the women's game was by close rivals Norway. Well, another Scandinavian country, who, again, same as Sweden, same as Denmark, they embrace the UEFA sort of request for the FAs to take by taking these women's teams under their wing, except the FAs actually invested in the teams and actually put. Don't get me wrong, it's they are better. They weren't perfect, but they were better. But obviously, the results paid pretty quickly. Norway, I think, did Norway win the first Women's World Cup?
Did they win the first Women's World Cup? They got to the final. They lost to the States.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, they did one. They won the second one.
That was it. Yeah, 1995.
Yeah, and they've got a very long history of making semi-finals in the World Cup as well. They've also won this twice, which is the second most. This is the Euros, I mean, out of anybody. They are second to the Germans. So Norway, a very successful side. I think they've made another 2 finals, 3, 4, another 4 finals as well. So Norway, stalwarts of the women's game.
Yeah, the best player of the 1995 World Cup was Hager Riise, who actually later became the Great Britain Olympic coach in 2021, if you recall.
I do recall. Also, not related to John Arne. I looked that up.
Not related to John Arne. Yeah, that was the first thing I did as well.
She's got I think she's got one of the records for something in the Euros. Jumps to mind. I can't remember.
The number of appearances, maybe. She had 188 caps for Norway. Some of the cap records in the women's game are incredible.
Yeah, I think that might be it.
Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's kind of me. There we are, 1984.
Well, this is
the beginning.
It stayed a 14 tournament, didn't it, till 95. Then the 97 edition was the first that was played with 8 teams, followed by 2001 and 2005, which were also 8-team editions. I think the third expansion happened in 2009. 2009 and 13 tournaments, 12 teams participated. And it's from 2017, the one that was hosted by the Dutch, which they also won, as we've already previously mentioned. That was the first 16-team tournament. So basically, it's quadrupled in size in 20 years. And 11 teams have made their debuts since 2009, including, as I've already mentioned, again, the Dutch, who went and won it.
Yeah.
And 20 teams in total have participated officially. Definitely growing. And yeah,
I think let's enjoy it being 16 teams while we can, because they will eventually expand it, same as they had in the men's tournament, and it will go to 24 teams, and we will have the stupid third place teams getting through in the group stage, basically being exhibition matches for a lot of it. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, no, for sure. But hopefully we'll see an even even more diverse set of winners, because Germany have 8, Norway have 2, and Sweden, Netherlands, and England have 1. And obviously the fun thing about that is Netherlands and England are the last 2 winners, which are both first-time winners. So which is setting a trend. And if Spain were to win this year, they would be another first-time winner, and they are favourites. So we'll see what happens there. But there's lots of other teams that have done well.
Yeah.
Who, if they continue to take it seriously, continue to invest in it, continue to progress it and give it opportunities, they may well find themselves with an opportunity of, bringing home some major silverware. And the obvious one to that is Italy. They've made a few finals without winning. Denmark have made a final and lost. Quite recently, actually, Denmark lost to the Netherlands in 2017. And then you've got Austria, France, who we've already mentioned, being a very good side that have never really kicked on, and Finland, who have also all made semis. So yeah, it's becoming very competitive. It's not a foregone conclusion that it'll be the same team anymore, like it was with Germany. I think Germany won 5 in a row at one point between 97 and 2013.
Yeah, and some World Cups in there as well.
Yeah.
They were the dominant team in women's football.
Although, what is fun, if we're to, again, find the positives in that, they beat a different team in every final apart from Sweden, who they beat twice. Sweden, Italy, Norway, England. Oh, no, sorry, they beat Norway twice as well.
Oh, well.
And that's because they won 6 in a row, not 5.
There's been some Germans yelling at you during that portion of it.
They are quite good. Yeah, and they won back-to-back World Cups in that period as well, you're right.
There's no one to blame for German dominance. Obviously, the the DFB finally got round to embracing it. German culture and level of sort of social conservatism in that respect has lessened over the years. In fact, it is relatively progressive as a country now, certainly in social terms. So fair play to them for embracing it. As we've mentioned before, had the English FA done that, had the Italian FA done that, had many other FAs done that earlier, then Germany probably wouldn't have won 6 in a row. And fair play to the Scandinavian countries for putting up a fight against them, Sweden and Norway particularly, because they actually did embrace it. Although those size of those countries, they were never likely to be able to always compete against the likes of Germany with 80 odd million people.
Yeah. Like it's not limited to Europe. We've obviously focused heavily on the Women's Euros for obvious reasons, but like the game is just massive now. Like the USA are obviously the best team in the world traditionally.
Yeah,
they've got the most professional league. They've got the most money, big population as well.
A huge game in college football is the main thing. So they have a massive pool of players
to pick from. Yeah,
It's such a popular game in women's college, which is such obviously a heavily invested in section of sport, which no other country really can replicate.
And then, but you've also got China have made a World Cup final in the past.
Yeah.
So have Brazil. Japan have won it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They beat the States on pens. I think Japan also won 2012 Olympic gold, didn't they? I should know. I went to it.
Oh, well, we certainly didn't. Yeah.
I went to the final. I think they beat the US. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. I should remember it because I literally was at the game.
Sadly, the US beat Japan.
Did they?
In the final there. It was...
what was the score?
It was 2-1. 2-1. Collie Lloyd scored twice.
I think the winner might have been a bit of a pile driver. But yeah, okay, I've misremembered that. But at least I remember the finalists.
You did.
It was in my defence 13 years ago now, which is also insane.
Yeah, you don't have to make me feel old. That was an unnecessary part of this episode.
Yeah, I know. That was unprovoked. Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you want me to end on another note in terms just to illustrate what we've been saying and emphasising about its popularity?
Go for it. I do have one thing I'd like to say at the end, but yeah, go for it.
Like the expansion in attendances is wild.
Oh yes.
Like I mean, the highest attendance by some margin was the last final at Wembley, England and Germany. Saw 87,192 in attendance, which is insane. Compare that to the 27 final in Holland between the Netherlands and Denmark, which is 10th on the list of highest attendances. That was 28,182. But I think most interestingly, only 2 games not in the last 8 years are in the top 10 in terms of attendances. England versus Finland in the 2005 tournament, we were hosts and we got knocked out in the groups. That had 29,000. And then the only other anomaly, I guess, is the Germany-Norway final in 2013, which is 41,000.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at those statistics in terms of the last 8 years, it's very consistent with what we've been saying about, the growth of the game and its popularity.
Well, the one thing that happens, obviously I'm saying there's going to be a lag on the players getting through to reach the age they become professional footballers. Then there's going to be a lag on that for the coaches. The one thing that there is not a lag on is the supporters. You can see how popular the sport is by just how many people are going to watch it. And not just young girls, like boys and girls. They're all going, they all love it. I've got plenty of my players who I coach who have been to see a few women's football games and enjoy it, genuinely. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's on TV. It's on TV a lot.
It's constantly on. It's like every episode, every game is on TV. Yeah,
yeah. I'll tell you where you can watch it in a minute, and I think it's important to do that in this episode. I'm gonna save everyone the heavy lifting, but you wanted to say something else. I think.
Yeah. Obviously, Diogo Jota passed away last Thursday, which was incredibly sad. I just wanted to say before we leave, because I didn't want to make the last thing we say in this episode be about a man when we're talking about women's football, but I did read a good post by Her Sport. I don't know if you've seen it.
I did see it.
Yeah, it's a really good post. So I'm just going to share it with people today in full, because I think if you haven't seen it, it's worth listening to. And if you have seen it, then you probably won't mind me repeating it. This is from Her Sport, written obviously after Jota's death was announced. We don't often post about men's sport, but today we're making space. A Liverpool football club, whenever there was a campaign about women or keeping girls in the game, Diogo Jota showed up. Not because he had to, because he understood why it mattered. Last year, he sat beside Ireland's Leanne Kiernan on International Women's Day and lent his voice to a message bigger than football. He spoke about the women that raised him. He spoke about his partner and the support she gives him. He glowingly mentioned Marta and Serena Williams as the kind of role models he hopes his 2-year-old daughter and sons will grow up admiring. We believe everyone has a duty to care about equality and equity. Jota understood that and acted on it. A devastating loss for his family, his teammate, and everyone who saw the strength of his character beyond the game. Rest in peace, Diogo and Andre. There you go.
That's very nice. It was very nice.
It is.
So yeah, be more like Diogo.
Yeah.
Be more like
Men,
Diogo.
be more like Diogo and less like some of the other men we've mentioned in this episode.
Less like the guy in Germany.
Yes. Especially him.
Speaking of which, if you want to watch it, if we piqued your interest. In Germany, it's on ARD, ZDF and DAZN. In Denmark, it's on Viaplay. In Finland, it's on YLE. I know if you're from these countries, you'll probably know this. But you also might not. So I'm just going to carry on. France, TF1 and France Télévision. Ireland is RTE. Netherlands is NOS or NOS. Norway, NRK or TV2. Sweden, SVT or Viaplay. In the UK, it is BBC and ITV for England and Scotland, and also in Wales, you'll find it on S4C. Australia, because I know you guys love your women's football, Optus and Stan Sports. Canada, which you're massive over there as well, TSN. Hong Kong, if you're still with us, is iCable. And in the USA, Fox Sport and TUDN. Heavy lifting done for you, no excuses. Don't need to even Google it. Just tune in if you fancy it. And where are we going next week, Jack?
Next week, well, where are we going? So there's obviously a couple of really big boxing matches on next week. If you care to remind us which they are, Ben?
Usyk versus Dubois and
yes.
Pacquiao versus Barrios. Pacquiao making one of these comebacks that they tend to try and do. Might be painful.
Yeah. So we're not going to talk too much about the sport of boxing, I don't think, because it's a bit self-explanatory. There's obviously a lot of history to it. The history goes it's proper history, the history of boxing. But we are going to talk about a period of boxing history, a few boxers involved in that period, and then just a bit about sort of these upcoming fights and a bit of background there, so you can really enjoy it to the max. So might be a slightly different episode, but I'm looking forward to it. Done a lot of resourch for this one.
Yeah, you have. I already know one of the stories that you're going to be telling, and it's fun.
Months of research, yeah. I told you this story many months ago. It's a great story. It's
a very good story. So yes, if you like boxing or combat sports or want to know a bit more about it,
or if you just want to know more about it,
yeah, then join us then. But in the meantime, support England. We need all the support we can get. We need to beat the Netherlands, and then we also need to do the Welsh. So apologies, Wales, if that does come to fruition. If we're to stand a chance of defending our title.
Yeah.
Here's to hoping.
If Netherlands do outdo England and England are knocked out of this tournament early, obviously it'll be sad, but that England-Wales game is happening either way, and it'll be a great game regardless, because the Welsh team will be very, very up for getting a result in that game. And who knows, Wales might still have a chance of going through by then.
Yeah, if they beat the French, we'll see.
Yeah, you never know.
Cool. All right, I'll see you next week, pal.
I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Once more, thank you for listening again to the Sporting Almanac podcast, you bunch of legends. Thank you too to all our new listeners. There's been a fair few in the latest episodes. Ben and I might be making this for the love of the game, but your engagement and time spent listening mean the world to us. If you feel like giving a little back, then like, subscribe, rate or comment will do nicely, but please tell your friends too and spread the word. Our theme tune is Oh Yeah by Harmonia Productions. You can find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac, or drop us an email at thesportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. Next up, we're diving into a little boxing history. Until then, stay curious. Whether it comes to you easy or need fighting for, sport is nothing without the history that makes it. Goodbye.